Released in 2016 and developed and published by Hello Games based out of Guildford, England, and distributed by Sony for the PlayStation 4 and IM 8-bit for the PC release. It's No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky is a procedural-generated exploration survival game. You start the game in a loading screen showcasing the vast galaxy the game contains. Sure enough, the game starts and you wake up on a random generated planet of the game's choosing, to what seemingly appears to be the crash site of your ship. You then begin making the necessary repairs to it by gathering the required resources, and then begin your journey in exploring the vast reaches of space in the hopes of reaching the center of the galaxy. Though once you're in space, you basically survive the vastness of it by maintaining your suit's life support systems, your ship's fuel, and of course gathering rare resources and items to make easy money, which is referred to as units. Oh, and of course making first contact with intelligent life. Once you begin exploring the galaxy, you'll slowly begin to build your reputation with the alien species, learn their language, and gain the ability to trade with them. So you can earn better multi-tool devices, upgrades, and even purchase better ships. Or, just find a crashed one if you're lucky and take that instead. As you explore different systems and planets, you can also rename them to whatever you like, as long as it's not too raunchy for the profanity filter to pick up, as well as name whatever else you begin to discover and scan on the surface of planets you visit. This is then also shared online with everyone playing the game as well, whom if you're lucky may possibly stumble on the system you've already visited and named. However, the chances of this are extremely small, even more so for actually meeting another human player. Well, nil actually, but we'll get into that later. As for the story of No Man's Sky, it's somewhat obscure or hidden if you will. There are plenty of random bits of information and lore spread out throughout the systems and planets you explore, however it is there. You just have to search for it. And without spoiling anything, if you search hard enough, it's somewhat interesting. But is any of this any good? Let's find out first with the good. The first moments of breaking through the atmosphere of your starting planet and entering space for the first time and just witnessing the scale of what's around you is simply put, breathtaking. The first few hours of this game, once you begin exploring space and warping to new systems and checking out new planets, were some of the most genuinely exciting moments in the game for me. Wrapping my head around the mechanics of all the different items and resources I came across, I felt like I was only scratching the surface of what was to come. But we'll get more on that later. Easily the best thing about this game is the vastness of its universe and the ability to explore all of it. This being procedural generation, every now and then you'll come upon a planet that is just packed with life and very cool things to see, as well as the odd dud of a planet with nothing really much on it. But even then you're bound to find plenty of resources even on a barren wasteland tier planet. But the game still threw plenty of surprises my way in this regard. For example, I got lost in a cave one time while exploring for resources, and I found out I could blast my way out using the plasma cannon on my multi-tool. I didn't even realize the environments were destructible in this manner, and it made cave exploring much more fun. Then throw in a colorful sci-fi themed art style and presentation taking plenty of cues from iconic sci-fi of years past, and you've got a gorgeous game at that, at least in terms of art style and presentation. As for the gameplay and mechanics themselves, easily the best mechanic I found was learning the alien languages and deciphering them. Each time you learn a new word, the more and more you speak with different aliens, the more and more you'll begin to understand what they're saying, as the words you've learned are highlighted in red during conversations. This also applies to different monoliths and ancient ruins you'll find scattered around different planets. Which brings up my next favorite thing, the hidden lore and history of these alien factions, as well as the random traveler logs you'll discover scattered around different planets. As for the soundtrack side of things, it's probably one of the other best aspects of the game itself. From the moment you enter space for the first time and hear the haunting soundtrack, it fits the mood perfectly. To just generally flying around space or exploring a world, the background music really sets the mood beautifully. But now let's discuss what kills the mood, with the back. Before I begin listing the many issues I have with No Man's Sky, for some perspective, I went into No Man's Sky with little to no expectations for this game. For the most part, I went into this game completely blind, as I imagine a lot of people have, considering what little was truly known about this game upon release. But after exploring a number of systems and different planets, I quickly began to realize I was actually scraping the bottom of the barrel. Despite the massive scale of the galaxy that No Man's Sky offers, sadly the content it offers is very shallow. The game feels like a skeleton of what could have been a more complete experience. For example, the game is a survival game that throws survival elements your way, like gathering resources to fuel your ship, maintaining your life support systems, and hostile life, extreme weather planets, space pirates who randomly attack you in space. Yet when you die, the game doesn't punish you almost in any way. You can simply just go back to where you died and pick up your stuff without any consequence. The game overall will throw zero challenge your way. Maintaining your life support system and fuel for your ship is pathetically simple and mundane. Surviving extreme weather planets, whether they're hot, cold, toxic, radioactive, whatever, is all the same exact formula. You simply have to watch out for a bar in the left corner of your screen from reaching zero to avoid damage to your health, and you can simply avoid this by going inside your ship, a settlement, or a cave for a few seconds, and it immediately refills. You can also equip shield upgrades that prevent this from happening as long as you maintain their energy or fuel, if you will. As for these space pirates, they're a threat when you start the game off at first and you have no upgrades to your ship, but throw in an extra shield upgrade and increase the weapon power of your ship, and you'll be taking on a dozen space pirates in no time without any issue. You've also got the robot sentinels on the surface of planets that wander aimlessly around the environment that are there to protect stuff for lore reasons. If you get on their bad side, they'll begin to attack you, and in the top right corner you'll have kind of a star system like in Grand Theft Auto. The higher it gets, the more will come after you. The problem being though, you can simply run a good 30 feet away, and after about 10 seconds or so, they'll immediately forget about you. Worse yet, once you've done some upgrading to your multi-tool, they'll simply become a minor annoyance as you blast them away in seconds. So basically, the game has survival elements, but the problem is it throws absolutely no challenge to your survival whatsoever, making the survival game aspect completely pointless. Next up is the inventory. From the moment you start the game, you're given a pathetically small inventory, which you'll have to get used to by micromanaging the different resources you pick up. However, if you decide to equip any kind of upgrade, it takes up an entire inventory slot, thus reducing your already very limited space. Maybe this was to make the game more challenging early on, but considering you can refill your life support systems with carbon, which you can get from almost any type of plant on any planet, and the survival already being pathetically easy, I honestly don't see the point in limiting the inventory this way. Not like it matters anyways, as you can thankfully find inventory upgrades through drop pods, which you can find scattered around planet surfaces, which allow you to gain access to an extra inventory slot for a maximum of 48 slots. But probably the biggest issue with this game for me, an issue that just flat out made me stop playing altogether in pure frustration, is the stability of the game. No Man's Sky, sadly, is a bit of a train wreck to put it lightly in terms of technical problems. I can't think of any game of this hardware generation on launch that has crashed for me this much. I'm not talking like once or twice or even a few times. The game has crashed for me well over 24 times, just in my footage alone, mostly when either naming planets or uploading something I discovered or going through the options tab in general, or trying to warp to a different system. The game would immediately close out and I'd be greeted with a very familiar blue error screen. I decided to even do a test and see how many times the game would crash if I warped 13 times to 13 different systems in succession with the amount of warp coils I had in my inventory. Out of the 13 separate warps, the game crashed on me 7 times. So basically, warping to a different system is a coin flip on whether or not you'll actually get there or the game decides to crash instead. It got to a point where I was too worried about the game crashing on me when I had a bunch of resources on me that I would have to save at a save spot before I even attempted to name a planet, look through the options tab, or even warp to another system. And even then, at times the game would still crash or even freeze on me out of the blue during gameplay. I've even had times after the game crashed, I would start it up, go through the space loading screen thing, and the game would crash again. And of course, with the PC release, judging from user reviews, it didn't seem to fare much better. Graphically speaking, as I've said earlier, the art style and presentation is pretty nice, and considering how massive the game is, I didn't expect this to be a graphical juggernaut. Honestly, my only complaint with the game graphically is the stupidly low field of view. Normally, FOV barely even bothers me in a video game. I'm usually perfectly content with the default FOVs in most games, but the FOV in No Man's Sky's PS4 release is pathetically low for whatever reason. And worse yet, it has no slider option to adjust it. I felt like a horse with blinkers on. The game also gets very samey very fast. It's pretty clear in the game and the algorithm used uses a ton of recycled assets. Every interior to a space station, for example, is almost identical. You'll see plenty of the same type of foliage, plant life, and even slightly changed animals on different planets. But it is kind of minor and understandable considering this is a procedural generated game, and the algorithm has to work with what it's given. As for somewhat of a spoilery kind of gripe I have with this game, the ending. I'll include an annotation right here to skip this segment, if you're interested. But basically, to sum it up with as little detail as I can, do it all over again. That's pretty much it, which I guess it's all about the journey, right? The problem being, though, when the journey is basically... Then to add some more fuel to the fire of this train wreck, the developers, or namely and more specifically Sean Murray, more or less lied about multiplayer being in this game.
You guys are literally building your own massively multiplayer world that's procedurally generated, and is there anything that this game doesn't have?
Some people might expect things that aren't in the game, you know.
Can you land on a comet?
Yeah, at the moment you can land on asteroids.
Will you be able to play with your friends?
Yeah.
Can you grief other players?
A little bit.
Do we ever get to see ourselves?
No, you don't see yourself, so the only way for you to know what you look like is for somebody else to, see you.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
Wow.
Two people do actually find themselves on the same planet. We want you to be aware of that.
You can see on the left side a black pillar.
At the end of the day, I feel like No Man's Sky should have had another year, even possibly longer, of development time under it, to deliver something that could have been possibly special. Like I said earlier, I feel like this game was a skeleton of a game that could have been. But with that said, I also feel like a ton of people went in this game with unbelievably high expectations. And it didn't help matters with the Sony marketing machine in full force, hyping this game up as the next big thing, and more or less masqueraded what is basically an indie game from a small developer with a 15-person staff as this genre-defining big game changer, which also in turn probably put a ton of pressure on this small staff to release this game as quickly as possible, and considering the end result, it seems like a likely case. And as I mentioned earlier, I really liked this game at first. My first good chunk of hours with No Man's Sky were great. I felt like I was scratching the surface of something big, only to realize very soon after seeing a few different planets, I've basically witnessed everything this game has to offer. Then throw in a list of problems ranging from technical, lack of challenge, the developers basically bullshitting. It's hard to just glance over these issues and write a positive review about all this. No Man's Sky is memorable, but it'll sadly be memorable for all the wrong reasons. But with that said, now it's time for